All right, everybody. It is Thursday. It's another time for another chat loop back off. Today we have Andy. We're going to talk about KubeVela. Introduce yourself and take it away, sir. Feel free to
All
ask
right.
questions in the channel.
Yeah, definitely keep those questions coming. I'm Andy. I'm the CTO at Fairwinds. We do services and software around Kubernetes, but more importantly, I have been working on cloud native technologies for 8 or 9 years at this point. I can't keep track anymore. And I'm a CNCF Ambassador and a co-chair of the policy working group. So I'm just a big fan of all things cloud native and open source. I am here today to learn about KubeVela. I have heard of it in the past. I have seen people talk about it before, but I've never used it myself. I've never had an opportunity to check it out. And so when this came up, I was like, let's talk about KubeVela. So if we go to their site at KubeVela.io, we see that KubeVela is a modern software delivery platform. So it is for deploying and operating applications. From what I've seen, it looks like we have not only the deployment piece of building applications, but also the building piece as part of this. And it's all run as code. It sounds like someone on LinkedIn pinged me yesterday, said that they hope we get into the advanced queue stuff that we can do for looks like building and doing workflow orchestration with KubeVela. So maybe we'll get into that today. But I'm a hands-on learner, so I'm just going to jump straight to get started here. And let's go up more to installation and get started there. We're going to install in Kubernetes because I don't know how to install anything anywhere else anymore. It's just not in my wheelhouse. So we're going to stick with Kubernetes. And we need to install a CLI. We've got instructions for a curl pipe bash or brew. I'm not going to do either one of those. I've actually been using Flocks lately. If y'all aren't familiar with it, it's kind of cool stuff, but I'm going to use Flocks to see if I can find it. It looks like we have it available via Flocks, which means it's available as a Nix package. And we're going to do a Flocks install of KubeVela so we can get that CLI going. And that'll take a few seconds. But once we have our CLI installed, we can jump down to installing KubeVela itself. We've got a CLI install, or we've got a Helm install. I'm going to opt for Helm because I'm still a big fan. So we're going to Helm repo add the KubeVela repo. We're going to do a Helm repo update. We've got the CLI installed up in the top pane there. And then I'm actually going to take a look at what it's going to create. So this is the command they want me to run. Oh, I did not copy properly there. Oh, I did. There we go. I'm going to do a Helm template of KubeVela, KubeVela/Vela core. And we're going to do a slice, kubectl slice. And we're going to just put that in. Let's temp KubeVela. I like to take a look at the manifest I'm going to install before I do it. All right, 123 files. That's a lot. So maybe we won't look through all these, but it looks like there's quite a few different CRDs related to KubeVela. Some cluster roles, component definitions. There's a lot going on there. So I'm not going to look through every one of those files. Let's just go ahead and do the Helm install and see what happens. Why not? It's a kind cluster. It's a clean, brand new kind cluster. So if we break it, nobody will mind. I wonder what I should be expecting. All right. It looks like there's also a UI we can install. Let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and see if our command line's working too. So we've got Vela working. And looks like we have quite a few different commands. We've got init for applications. This is all the next steps. I just want to verify that we've installed the thing properly. I don't see a lot. Maybe I should have done the CLI install, but let's run Vela system and see if there's something in here. Vela system info. All right, that's working. We've got a cluster gateway and the core, I'm guessing, controller. So I was probably just a little quick on this. What namespace did I install this in? That is a great question. Namespace, Vela system. Here I am assuming namespaces. So it goes in the Vela system namespace. There we go. Now we see our running controller pod. We see our cluster gateway. We've got that Vela system info. There was also a system diagnose command. This says the clusters are fine. I don't know what that means, but let's keep going on the install guide. So it looks like we can use the CLI to enable this UI. So let's do enable Vela UX. That seems to have worked. And we can port forward to it. I'm going to do that in this lower pane here. So it's working there. And oh, I popped up in the wrong window, but we will slide it over here. All right. Wants me to reset the admin username and password. Oh, you're going to make me do a good password. That's good, but I don't really want to get out my password manager here. All right. We've given it a new username and password. While it's thinking, we've got the ability so we can change the way that that service is exposed. That makes sense. So for this it seems pretty straightforward to just keep doing our port forwarding install. And we'll go back to the get started guide. It seems like we have it installed. That was pretty easy. I like that. We do have options for advanced installation. I assume we have a whole lot of Helm values that we can change here. We'll have to go look at that chart later if we're curious about the different options, but let's move on in the getting started, deploying our first application. So I think it would be good. We have a core concepts section here where we define what an application is. So what is a KubeVela application? Looks like it's an OAM or open application model application. Looks like, of course, we have a YAML spec for it, which I would expect. Higher level abstraction to make a full application deployment. So we have a DAG. So we can do workflow type things here. Each one, we have a series of components. So it looks like a component could be a Helm chart, customized package, Terraform module, or anything. It has some traits, so like domain names and ports and things like that, operational behaviors, and then the workflow of the deployment, so how it gets deployed, and then we can enforce policy here as well. That's good to know. I don't know what those policies are exactly, but maybe we'll get into that in a minute. So let's go back to deploying our first application. I'm going to copy this, and in our directory here, we'll create this file. Let's take a look at what we got here. It's our first Vela app. It is an express server. It exposes a web service, or it's a type web service. We've got an Docker image name here, a port to expose, and then it's got a trait called a scalar. I'm assuming that's going to define an HPA, but we'll see what happens when we get there. We've got some policies about where it should be deployed. So we're just deploying to this one cluster. I'm guessing, well, I'm not guessing. KubeVela obviously has the ability to do multi-cluster deployments. So that's good to know. And then deploy HA, scalar properties, replicas 2. Don't know what all that means yet. We'll get into that. Workflow steps. Here we go. So our steps to deploy it. We're going to deploy. We're going to have a manual approval where we wait or suspend, and then we're going to deploy it to prod. We deploy it to one environment, and then we deploy it to target prod. So it's like a multi-stage deployment so that we can make sure that we're testing things in our non-prod environment first. That makes a lot of sense. One component with one operational trait, container image as a web service with one replica, 3 policies. Yep. Okay. That says basically what I just figured out there. So we're going to create an environment. This will create a namespace in the local cluster. So we're just going to use the one cluster to do multiple namespaces that would signify our prod and non-prod environments. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially for getting started. So if we look at our namespaces, we now have a prod namespace. And then we have Vela system. Let's see this application again, because now I'm realizing that we're deploying to the default namespace for our target default, and then we're deploying to the prod namespace for our target prod. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And that policy defines where we are, which target we're deploying to, and then we're adding this deploy HA. So in prod, it looks like we're going to up the number of replicas to 2, which makes sense. That's kind of cool. So we did the creation of the prod namespace. Going to use Vela to apply this YAML file that we just created. So we're going to do a Vela up-f. I've named this file initial application. So the app has been deployed. That was fast. Let's see what we've got. We have the Express server running in the default namespace. We have no HPAs, but we only had one replica, so I think that makes sense. I'm thinking maybe we actually aren't going to get HPAs here. We're just going to get multiple replicas. That makes sense to me. And we can do a few different things.
Andy, sorry to interrupt, but no. Your name label is covering your prompt on your stream.
Oh, wow. That is no good. Let's do...
We've been doing hash #enter,
this.
#enter, and then your command also works.
Yeah, for Tmux. Cool. Thank you for letting me know. That's super helpful. All right. So we can do a few things here with Vela, things that we could just do with kubectl, but Vela wraps it all nicely for us, so I don't have to find pod names and things. But let's take a look. Looks like we haven't actually deployed to prod yet. So I don't know why it's telling me to do that in prod right now. But let's try first port forwarding to first Vela app in the default namespace. Nope. Oh, we're still listening to our Vela UX. Let's skip that for the moment. And we'll go check out localhost. If I can find my 0 key, not 80,000. What are we doing here? Hey, look at that. We've got our initial app running on localhost 8000. I think we had to say namespace prod because if we look at this initial application, well, let's get application and see where it's at. So the application itself got deployed into the prod namespace. So when we did up-f initial application, interesting. So it is suspended in the staging environment like I expected. The app itself lives in prod, but the Express server is in the default namespace. So if I were to port forward directly to this in default, we would get that same look. But Vela figures out that the application itself that is in the prod namespace only has the pods in the default namespace. So that's what we're port forwarding to. That's super interesting. All right. We'll go back and keep following the instructions. I'm probably getting ahead of things here. All right. Well, we have a command to check the status of that app. So if I can just type once. Oh, we got a lot there. What's going on here? All right. We've got name, the namespace that it's in. It's in that workflow suspending. That's what I saw earlier. We see our workflow. It's just a step-by-step DAG. We don't have any branching in it. I definitely want to see how we define that at some point. We have succeeded deploying to default. We are suspended waiting for things. And the Express server in default is ready and running. So cool. That's what we would expect. That is exactly what we expect. So it's in workflow suspending. Workflow's finished the first two steps. It's waiting for manual approval. Check it by doing the port forward. We already did that. I'm not going to do it again. And that is the output we got. And now we can go ahead. We've checked. Staging is working. Does what we expect. Now we're going to go ahead and roll out to prod. So we're going to workflow resume our first Vela app. And so I'm guessing if we do status, we've got deploy to prod succeeded, and now we have it running in prod and prod and default namespace. So if I do get pods-a and just look for the Express server, we've got 1 in default and 2 in prod, which we expected from our application. Wow, everything's working the way it's supposed to. This is weird. Usually I've broken something by now. That's working. And if we port forward again, I'm super curious now. So if we do port forward to the app, which one do we get? 2 services that match. Okay. So it gives me the option to look. I don't know which one's which, but it does give me the option. So that is useful. And I won't know the difference because they're all the same image. But anyway, that's what I was curious about. All right. Looks like they want us to check out the GUI now. I'm good with that. Although I killed my port forward on the UX. So let's, I'm going to just port forward to the UX down here. I know you can't see that, but it's the same command I ran earlier to port forward to localhost 8000/login. See if it works. I don't know what's happening. Loading failed. Try hard refresh. Keep popping up windows over my restream. My UX is not working, and I'm getting a timeout down here. We can swap these real quick so he can tinker with that. So that was a Vela port forward to Vela UX. Let's see. Vela core, Vela. All right, now we've broken something. Let's make sure our UX is still. Ooh. Oh, that's listing all available add-ons. I want list. I just want the installed one. List, disable, manage, status. Add-on status, Vela UX. It says it's installed. Let's just try our port forward again. So we're going to run Vela port forward in Vela system. Let's try disabling and re-enabling it. It's now in phase rendering. I wonder if it's bad that I installed it via Helm chart and now I'm managing it with the CLI. That might not have been the smartest choice. Okay, this seems to be working again. I see a question came up. Y'all want to know about my terminal? This is Ghosty, the new terminal that got released probably a few weeks ago at this point. This username does not exist. Oh, I was given the prompt to create a user over here. Hey, we initialized an admin user. Now let's see if I can log in with that user. Hey, look at that. We have a UI. It doesn't see anything yet, but that's okay. We are on our way to having a UI. I'm going to close that. I'm going to close that. All right. Default users. That's not true. The default user was created by me. Let me we seem to have a disconnect here between the UI and the KubeVela controller itself, which is interesting. Don't know why that is. We can create new applications from here, but I want to see the applications I installed. Targets, and I don't see the project. I think I created a prod project. Connect existing cluster. No, that would be for an external cluster. I'm not sure what I have done wrong here. Installation. Oh, this just took me back here. That's not helpful. After the installation, you can view created. I wonder. What I have done wrong. Well, I guess we're not going to get a UI today. Let's maybe check some logs here. Switch windows. Let's switch to the Vela system namespace. And we'll, Vela UX server. There it is. Okay. Great. HTTP logs, not helpful. No default project found. Adding a default project. Failed to add or update add-on. Please init the platform first. I did. First admin user. Interesting. We do have the application. What other CRDs do we have? Pipe grep Vela. Oh. Oh, it's open application model CRDs. Okay. That's what the OAM is there. That makes a lot more sense. So we have applications, application revisions, policies, trait definitions, workflows. So all the stuff associated with those applications, but it seems like the Vela project concept is not a CRD. So can we manage projects with the Vela? I'm trying to figure out so that I'm communicating here why it said there were no projects when I'm pretty sure here in the application creation step we initialized a prod environment. Okay, different word there, but we see only one environment here. We did a second ago when it was working. We saw one environment that was the default, but we didn't see the prod environment which we created. So there's some sort of disconnect between what the UI can see and what I can see in the cluster. And I don't understand why. If anybody in the comments knows, please feel free to shout it out, because I know nothing about how this particular thing works as far as the UX server connecting, other than maybe the, I believe under admin, this is probably a little small, huh? Under admin, We don't have we have the local cluster. Okay, so it sees the cluster. That makes sense. Does it not have the right permissions? Maybe I should. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to run Vela install just to see what it does. Yes, I do want to overwrite. I'm going to overwrite the Helm installation with the CLI installation because I installed the UX via the CLI and I installed the main component via Helm. That seems like maybe a bad call. So I'm just going to do them both from the CLI and let it rewrite. I like that they saw that the Helm chart was already installed and it took it over. That's really convenient. Very fancy. I realize I haven't spent a lot of time on how we do more advanced application stuff because I know that's the whole point of KubeVela is to deploy applications. We did get an application deployed. That was cool. We got it from staging into prod. We had multiple environments. I do think a lot of folks are going to want to be able to see their applications through this UI. I know that's kind of one of the big selling points of like Argo CD. So I would like to get that working. But let's dive in a little bit more into, I don't know, let me think through this. So if I'm deploying an application, I'm actually super curious about the kind of the CI piece of this because we used a pre-built image, but if I'm building applications, I think the number one thing I need to do is build containers before I can run them. Maybe that's not what KubeVela is supposed to be focused on, but I'm super curious about it. So you can use declarative workflows with CI steps. Alternatively, you can use triggers to integrate with external CI. Well, if I want to use this, I'm going to replace my CI. So let's directly use declarative workflow with CI steps. So let's see what our other workflow steps are. OAM definitions are basic building blocks. Yes, that's what we were looking at. We have Helm definitions, Flux definitions, Argo definitions. Cool. Workflow steps. That's what I want to know about. All right, we can pass things between workflow steps. That's neat. There's a lot going on here. I think it would take me more than an hour to dive through all of this. If y'all want to see something specific, throw it in the comments. Ask me a question. I can go down that route. It does seem like we're much more focused on the deployment piece of it, which is fine. And maybe, going down the CI portion is outside of what I should be diving into here. So why don't we I want like deploy my second application. What can I change about it? I need like an intermediate step here in the instructions. Deploying Helm charts. That's fine. We could use that if we need dependencies deployed, especially in our staging environment. This is something we do a lot is in our non-production environments. So in that default environment, we have a lot of like Postgres or Redis or timescale stuff running next to the application. So it looks like we could, in this initial application, add a component. I don't know if we would want to do it as a component or a step in the deployment. I need some more samples. What do we have for examples out there? Hey, look at that. KubeVela samples. Love it. To audiences, platform builders, end users. This is for end users. That's okay. How to check details. What does that mean? I think we saw, well, let's take a look. What's in the hello world here? App. So there's a Python script. There's a Docker file to run that Python, which is just a hello world. Cool. That's what I would expect. We've got an app YAML, defines a web service, image, gateway. Okay. And then we've got a kind cluster configuration. What is app upgrade? Okay, this is pretty similar to what we were already doing, but it does add an ingress. So I don't think we have anything new here. This wants me to build the Docker image, push it, and then run it the way they would run it. All right, so nothing new here. Let's JavaScript, Mongo, API microservices. Sure, why not? Let's take a look at that. Several microservices in the app folder. KubeVela manifests. Here we go. We got a little bit more going on here. So we've got UI web service, pulls an image, sets some environment variables, needs an ingress. I like how easy these are to read. It's like, here's the different components of my app, and here's what they do. That is a cool way to think about applications. Similar deal, API. It is an enhanced web service. I don't know what the difference is in these types. Type scalar. Okay, so these are all the different components. Here's a Postgres DB. This is what I was kind of talking about. I might want to do next to my app. So that's cool. And then, oh, I need more than that. We add in some environment variables to initialize the database. And then we have a data API. So that's the app. Oh, so that enhanced web service is a component that we defined with another CRD. So this is a component definition. And that allows us to create reusable pieces like this deployment template that we have here. Long-running, scalable containerized service that have a stable network endpoint to receive external network traffic. Okay, so this is where we would say, like, this is what our standard deployment looks like. We're not using just a generic Kubernetes deployment, and then we define the parameters that go into it. So this allows us to reuse different pieces. So if I say all my deployments always need to look like this gives me a path for doing that with these component definitions. That's actually super cool and super powerful. And I could definitely see utilizing that. There's a lot going on in here with this template, which is kind of cool. Looks like we have different prompts. I'm going to assume those get picked up in, the UI via these specific comment strings, but that would be interesting to look into. Let's see if we can find the documentation on component definitions. There's a big old long question here. I got to, I'm going to read here. And to address the folks here, I am not using Zish. I am using Bash. And this is Tmux with custom themes, and then all with Ghosty, and then Starship for the prompt. So just to get all those questions out of the way. Considering that DevOps teams will need to adopt KubeVela's new application modeling approach and workflow management, what are the key challenges in the learning curve, and how can teams smoothly transition from tools like Helm and Customize to fully leveraging KubeVela for microservice deployments? That is a fantastic question. I really like that question because I've been kind of thinking about this in the back of my head the whole time here that because it's building on some of the things that we already use. So I can deploy a Helm chart with it, right? If you're deploying via Helm already, you could sort of just adopt your Helm deployment into this, KubeVela process as a first step. But then, if you're trying to roll that out to a whole bunch of teams with multiple microservices, maybe we can take that Helm chart and template out the values into one of these component definitions, I'm guessing here. But if we didn't want to do that, we could write component definitions for all the different pieces of our Helm charts and replace them entirely. There's probably a lot of different paths to doing that. It does seem like the learning curve is a little bit steep because there's a lot of concepts being thrown at us really fast here. And it's a little bit tough to know kind of the right path to take through them. I'd love to see a little bit more piece by piece getting started guide here that like kind of walks us through, okay, now you need to understand this concept. Now you need to understand this concept. We definitely go from, a hello world to the rest of the owl rather quickly here. If you know that reference, it's just, here's all the info and not a ton of guidance on how to use it. I could definitely see it's all here. All the pieces I need are here. I'm just not sure the right way to step through them, which is interesting. So anyway, I have definitely forgotten that I was trying to get that UI running. So let's restart our port forward and see if maybe we have applications showing. Nope, we still don't have them. So I'm gonna create a prod environment here in the default project and see. Maybe there's a port forwarding problem here. Yeah, we don't seem to be able to get this UI working. I may just have to abandon that. What's it trying to do here? Oh, doesn't like sending telemetry. Well, that's fine. Network error. Oh, my port forward has an error. I wonder if we're having port forwarding / connection issues where it's expecting to speak to KubeVela on localhost, but it's running in the cluster, so it can't do that. Oh, now we have a target. Can I create this prod environment? And what will happen? So we created that environment locally. Earlier, we do have a prod environment and the default environment. That's yeah, this UI is not working for me at all. So we're just gonna move on from that. I'm gonna let it go. Take a look at these CRDs and see if we have additional ones. So all the applications are versioned. I'm guessing each time we deploy them. That's kind of cool. So let's take a look at our initial application and change something here. Let's change the non-prod number of replicas to 2 and the prod replicas to 3. And what was the command to apply that? It was Vela up -f initial application So let's get those application revisions again. V1. Okay, I don't know how we necessarily change revisions. That's all right. Great question. In another question coming in here, can you explain the differences with Argo CD or Flux when KubeVela can be a good choice? I can't explain the difference between Argo and Flux in relation to KubeVela. Argo CD and Flux are both GitOps tools that apply YAML to your cluster. They both have sort of different constructs by which they do that. I don't know the difference. I'm guessing based on what I saw here and in other places within KubeVela, it can utilize either to deploy the application. So this application here in this example is called Infra GitOps, and it is a customize directory. And so it sounds like it's using Flux essentially to apply that customized directory. I know I saw Argo CD in here somewhere. Argo CD KubeVela integration. I see. So by default, it uses Flux. Works with Flux add-on to complete the GitOps journey for applications. You need to enable the Flux add-on to perform Git operations quickly. Any changes? Explain the integration of KubeVela and Argo CD. We have two approaches to integrate this flow. Okay, infrastructure agnostic. This is not overly clear. It does look like KubeVela can integrate with either one. I don't know, having just learned KubeVela today, then I can't say specifically, but it does. Yeah, I did see, thank you for the comment there. If you want to deploy a Helm chart using KubeVela, you enable the Flux add-on, and so it's going to use Flux to template out that Helm chart in order to render the manifests. So why don't we just do this example? We can do the Redis example here. So we can do Redis application.yaml, put that in here, and we've got a Helm chart coming from the Bitnami repo, which I don't know if that's... We'll see if this works. The Bitnami repo has had some drama lately with moving to OCI and Docker Hub. So, and then a version and then some values that would go into a values file. So relatively simple Helm deployment. And then according to this, I need to enable the Flux CD add-on. And then there's a Helm definition added. You can... Oh, so it's going to create... Well, let's see. This will be interesting. I think this is going to create a component definition for Helm. So let's give it up to 600 seconds to find out.
Ten-minute warning.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. That is helpful as well. So KubeVela is kind of like cross-plane. The main idea, you build component definitions like I was talking about earlier using QLang. I'm guessing that is what we were seeing here with all these parameters being defined and whatnot. I am not familiar with QLang. I did see something in the docs. We'll go back to that in a second. And then you create applications that use the different components. So kind of like I was talking about earlier, you have different components. It sounds like those components can be just about anything. So we're going to run that show Helm command. This, I'm going to have to make it smaller to just parse it. Vela show Helm. Looks like, oh, there's a bunch of different like parameters on how the how Helm charts can be rendered and deployed and whatnot. So let's look at component definitions in the cluster. And yeah, so I jumped a little ahead there. If we look at the component definitions available in the cluster, let me run that again because output was difficult. We have lots of different component definitions already included, such as customize or Helm. So this is a Helm release. So that component definition defines a Helm release. And then if we then reference that in our Redis application, so it's a Helm type component, then it will render out that Helm chart when we do it. So if we do a Vela up -f Redis application, I did not pay attention to what namespace we were putting that in. I'm going to guess it goes in the default one. Let's just look for Redis. Oh, I went to prod. Okay. So I think it was Vela status. No. Oh, yeah. Vela status Helm Redis. We will see that it is running. It's in the namespace prod. Fetch repository successfully, delivery, Helm release in progress, reconciliation in progress. So it is using it sounds like Flux to render that Helm chart, which explains why we don't have. Oh, there's our Redis Helm. It is pending install. Redis takes a minute to get itself ready because it's doing replicas. And so that takes a couple minutes. But we have a Helm release. It was created by Flux in the prod namespace. Yeah, that's actually pretty nice. It's a very clean wrapper around those things, and it would allow us to take all those different components and put them together into an application. So thank you to Anton Grishko in the chat, in the questions, for clarifying some of those things for me. That was super helpful. So it sounds like component definitions defined in Q are kind of the building blocks that let us then deploy more complex things or things that we've predefined. And it comes with a bunch of those out of the box. So looks like if we do Vela component list, we'll see all of the ones that we have by default now. So we have cron tasks, daemon sets, Helm charts, Kubernetes, just standard Kubernetes objects, customize. We've got tasks, web services, workers, and ref objects. And then raw. So just pure, that's deprecated use case objects. But we can define these ourselves as well. So lots of different components that we can work with. Any other questions, folks? We've got just a couple of minutes left. It sounds like I'm trying to find some more information about Q, because Q looks fairly powerful. It does look like it's not necessarily. I've heard of Q before, I know, but I have not used it in a while, or ever, shall we say. But it is a language that lets us do an open source data validation language and inference engine with its roots in logic programming. So it's not a general purpose programming language, but it merges types and values into a single concept. Okay, cool. Judging by these samples, it looks like it can do quite a lot. Not a lot more than we can explore in 5 minutes, but definitely something to dive into how you might be able to do some very interesting templating of these components that you might want to use. So I've got some if statements in here. If we're creating a secret, if we're using a config map, defining types for validation. Also, I see nesting types. So different types of volumes that you might be adding to this deployment that we were looking at earlier. So there's quite a lot in here. It's pretty cool. Also, it looks like a lot to learn. Might have to stick to some of the built-in constructs with my exploration of this if I take it further. Cool. Anything else? Questions will be open for a few seconds, minutes. Other concepts we might have wanted to look at. I'm always interested in the operation of it, how we do RBAC. Looks like it has its own internal RBAC as well as utilizing Kubernetes RBAC, similar to how Argo CD works. All right. Multi-cloud. Yep. KubeVela is multi-cloud, lets you deploy to multiple environments. We saw that earlier. It did look like those environments could definitely be multiple clusters. It could be multiple namespaces in multiple clusters, and it doesn't really care which one's which as long as it has access to do them all. They're all, as this comment says, first-class citizens in the world of KubeVela. So good to know. I'm not seeing much else that we can cover in 30 seconds to a minute. But yeah,
I think we got it.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Let me just check the chat one more time. Thanks, everyone, for stopping by, and we'll be back next week. And thanks, Andy. You got the last word.
Thank you so much, y'all. Have a great rest of your week. And yeah, see you later.